All right, good morning, everyone. Well, I've had the good fortune of working at ASP for the past 8 years, and one of the, I guess, the main drawbacks of working in a school like this is every summer, about a third of the students leave, and the new part is we always bring in about a third who are new. Uh-oh. But this summer, it's my opportunity to head home, and today is actually going to be my last day teaching a class here at ASP, and I was invited by Mr. Vezina to come up and give a little talk about any topic. And I decided that I wanted to share something very personal with you about a side of me that maybe not all of you do know, and that is that on the side, when I'm not here with my tie on, I'm outside, usually with a backpack, exploring the world. And I thought today I'd share some of what I've learned over the past few years as a part-time backpacker. But before I do that, I just wanted to say to all of you, and I've known many of you, some of you since you were in lower school, many of you in middle school, and some of you I'm just getting to know, but it's been a real honor and a privilege to work with all of you. And I hope I have a chance to say goodbye to all of you personally in the next few days, and I hope we keep in touch. Now, I'm preaching to the choir today because I'm talking about exploring the world, and many of you have been to more places than most people will travel in a lifetime. But today I'm going to talk with you about a specific type of travel that I've been exposed to for probably the past 15 years that maybe you'll want to try out as you go through your late teens and your 20s and maybe your 30s or beyond. But I thought I'd first introduce you to people who got it all started for me. You already had a sneak peek at them. These are my grandparents. The lady on the left is Hinda Nathan, and this is a picture of her when she was a teenager. She loved traveling. She had the bug as well, and what she did was she got a job on a cruise ship, sailed around Latin America for about 2 summers, and that was her first exposure to the world. My grandfather, Kurt Nathan, actually grew up in Germany, and he left in 1937 as a stateless refugee, went to the United States, only to return about 6 years later in a military uniform, serving both in France and in Germany. And the two of them spent their free moments traveling when they weren't raising a family, and particularly when they were in retirement. But if my grandmother were here today, she'd probably come here and talk with you about her greatest interest, which was very unique, and that was her love of thimbles. And she was actually, this might sound kind of ridiculous, but she was actually one of the top thimble collectors in the world. She co-founded the International Thimble Collectors Society. Loved thimbles. But she decided when she was, when she just retired, that she wanted to put her passion to the side to explore travel a little more in depth. She kept her favorite, she had thousands, she kept her favorite 12 and sold the rest to other thimble collectors around the world. And there are quite a few of them, so look for them. But when she sold her collection, they decided they were going to take the funds and they were going to travel the world in style. And I remember I was a little kid, and they stopped by my home and they said, "Dave, we're not going to see you for about half a year because we're going to be out exploring." And they gave me a giant box, and I opened it up, and inside there was a globe. Gave the globe to me, and by the way, this is 5-year-old Mr. Lynn. A little skinnier, a little more hair, and a lot better looking. But it's a 5-year-old. Spun the globe around a couple times, didn't really know what to make of it. But one thing they did that was great is every place they went, they wrote a postcard. And for 6 months, every week, my mom would go to the mailbox, pull out a postcard, and I just remember looking at the postcard and seeing the images. I remember the first time getting a postcard from China and seeing the script and trying to write it in crayon on a piece of paper and just being inspired by what they were doing. I remember it helped to establish my curiosity and interest in the world. And by the time I was 19, to give you a sense of how traveled I was, the only place I had been outside North America was Italy. And I'd been to Canada and Mexico, but fortunately through some college experiences, I had a chance to travel a bit. And since I've been here 8 years, I thought I'd share with you today 8 travel tips, things that you can take or you can choose not to take as you wander the world in your lives. These are things I did not invent, I've learned from others, and I'm happy to share them with you today. First of all, one of the rules of travel I've learned is that, sure, there are great ways of traveling where you can stay in luxury resorts, and I've stayed in all-inclusives, I've traveled first class in my life, and I enjoy it, and I'm sure those of you who have enjoyed it as well. But what I've also learned is that traveling on a budget has tremendous rewards. And by that I mean it's more than just saving a couple dollars and being able to buy something when you go home. But I've truly learned that by traveling on a budget, you become closer to the people who are living in the area that you're traveling to, or to other travelers. I often feel that when you spend money and you travel, you're often buying the luxuries of home, to have that fancy bed or the big TV or the familiar meal. What I found by budget travel is that it brings you into restaurants so you might not ordinarily go. And some of you who've been on the China trip probably recognize the noodle shop halfway up Taishan. This was a little side dumpling shop that I came across. And when I was in China, someone gave me the wise advice. They said, avoid the fancy, expensive restaurants. Look for the restaurants that are packed with locals. Go in there. There's a reason why they're packed with locals. Try out the food. And I'll tell you, that advice has almost never served me wrong. So don't necessarily feel you have to be wealthy in order to see the world. And if you are wealthy, don't necessarily feel that spending your money is the best way to see it. Stay in a cave in Tunisia. Try it out. It's actually quite comfortable. Stay in a yurt if you're going through Mongolia. See how the locals live. Try to get as close as possible. Sit at a cafe. Go public transportation. Go on a bus. Even if there isn't a seat, start conversations, and you'll realize that the world is really an interesting place. But as you're spending your money, there are several words of advice that I will give to you. And one is prioritize your gear. You're going to pack, and my suggestion is always pack light, as we often tell you when you go on these trips. But there are three things I will tell you never go cheap on. One, your walking shoes. Those of you who run cross country, you know what happens when you buy cheap shoes. Get something nice, comfortable, you're going to be spending time in them. The last thing you want is a giant blister on your foot. Next thing, whether you're skiing in the Alps, some of you know this well, or whether you're going through a desert, the sun is there. It's been nice, it's been around for the past couple days here in France. So make sure you have good sunscreen. Get the good stuff, because trust me, the last thing you want to have is a giant sunburn on the back of your neck or on your arms or worse. So good sunscreen. And the most important thing, the most important piece of gear you're going to have is your bag. And a friend of mine named Matt gave me the advice when I first started wandering. He said, buy a really good backpack. Don't go for a cheap backpack, go for one that's going to last. And I'll tell you, this bag that I have right here, my LL Bean that I spent about 120 on back in 2000, has been with me to over 90 countries. It has its tears, it has its issues, but it's dependable. The straps still work. It gives me the freedom of being able to use my hands. It's not flashy enough that someone's going to want to steal it, but it does its job. And I'll tell you, if you invest in your shoes, sunscreen, and a good bag, you're going to be a much happier traveler. By the way, the kid in this photo, this was in Sri Lanka. This is the nephew of one of our maintenance workers who I went to visit, and even this little guy could carry my backpack. So if I can do it, all of you can, or if this guy can do it, all of you can do it. So give it a shot. It's not that uncomfortable. But remember, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad gear. So travel well. Communication. Now, all of you study foreign language. I've certainly tried, varying levels of success. And hey, I encourage all of you to try to achieve fluency in as many languages as possible. But I also don't want you to be discouraged when you travel the world and don't know the language of the place you're going to. Just remember, the language of soul is more important than any language that's ever going to come out of your mouth. So go out there, learn the words, hello, please, thank you, I'm sorry, I have to use that one a lot, goodbye. If you know those basic words, you're fine. And then use other languages. Like for instance, this guy didn't want to have his photo taken. I figured that out just by looking. Sit down with people, communicate, laugh, share photos. This is in Ghana with a group of people who I could not communicate using words, but we sat around and we were still able to share experiences. I once was on a truck going into the mountains of Kosovo, and the truck driver and I spoke to each other, but we didn't understand anything we were saying. We just compared words, and we had a great time. But I'll tell you, if you really want to communicate with people, and you should really focus on people when you travel, don't just take photos of buildings. Remember to always serve and respect others. When you can, be of service. I'm going to embarrass Paul Williams right now. This is just a photo I think represents it. This is Paul working with a girl in India, and they couldn't speak the same language, but they shared joy. And you can see that in this photo. This is a photo of some students in Hana, South Africa, using music to communicate. You'd be amazed at how many ways there are to connect. And through those connections, you're going to develop the language inevitably. But don't be intimidated by it. Don't keep a place off your travel list simply because you don't know the language. Again, don't use that excuse not to do your French homework. Wisdom. Now, you're all in school. And most of you are going to go to college, and you're going to become well educated. You're going to read lots of books, and you're going to do research. You're going to go on the internet, you're going to spend time in libraries, and you're going to absorb the wisdom of the world. Now, I've had a chance to be involved in schools for most of my life. And I will tell you the greatest book that you're ever going to have is going to be this. It's your passport. The passport opens up the world, and it exposes you to places and experiences and people that are going to teach you lessons that are going to last you the rest of your life. And I think that looking at my grandparents, they did a majority of their travel when they were old. But I always try to encourage people to travel when they're young, because travel is like a magnet. It is everything that you experience after you travel will attach itself to those experiences. If you're taking a class on India or Indian history and you have been to India, you'll appreciate it all the more. If you meet someone from Sri Lanka and you've been to Sri Lanka, you'll be able to start that conversation. And I think that it unlocks doors. The more experiences you have, the better. Now, you're probably looking, some of you might be saying, oh, well, my passport is a little more difficult than others. I don't have an American or a European passport, and the visas are a headache. Well, let me introduce you to this guy. I had a chance to meet him, Kashi, who I bumped into shoulders with, I think somewhere in Vietnam or Cambodia. He has 2 world records. His passport is this one right here. It's the Indian passport, which is notorious for difficulty with getting visas. Some people in the room probably know that. But he has the world record for traveling to every single country in the world in the shortest amount of time. He made it happen, traveled on a budget, but it is possible for everyone. You can give it a go. Don't be intimidated. Look at the research that's out there. You have access to the internet. You have access to strategies that others have not had. So see travel as an opportunity to overcome barriers, not to let barriers get in the way. Okay. Follow your gut, rule number 5. Now, this has 2 meanings. The first one I don't have photos for, and that is that travel can be intimidating. You probably all know that there are certain parts of the world that are not safe. Even in the safest of places, there are places where you definitely don't want to go. And that's why you want to be smart. You want to keep your wit. You want to talk with people. If you see a dark alley and it's the middle of the night, it doesn't feel right, find an alternative route. If you're eating something, it doesn't smell right, don't eat it. Trust your gut. Learn to follow it. It's going to serve you right. There's a book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about following your instinct. Listen to it, and you'll get to know it better as you travel, as you wander the earth. But I also put this up here because one of the joys of travel is food. And I would say don't be intimidated. Even if you're on a special diet, and you come across a piece of bread loaded with cheese, a whole stick of butter, and a raw egg in the middle of Tbilisi, Georgia, dig in. It's delicious. Just let it go. I was in La Paz, Bolivia, and I was challenged to eat what they said was the most spicy dish of vendula. The little pepper that I'm holding, there were 40 in this dish. And they said if you eat it, you'll get a free t-shirt. Well, I needed the free t-shirt in the end because the t-shirt I'd been wearing was covered in sweat from eating this dish. But give it a go, because you only live once, as some people say. You'll learn. All right. Some of you have experience with this. Some of you have experienced the great scorpions of Beijing. I'll let you experience that at a night market if you haven't been. The pig roasts in the middle of Colombia. This is a picture. We went digging for crawfish in Louisiana, or eating with our hands in Africa. Try the food of the world. Chances are, people are always intimidated. They run to McDonald's. They're scared of spice. They're scared of this. If you're definitely allergic to something, of course, don't eat it. That's not good. But if it looks scary, smell it, close your eyes, taste it, and sometimes you'll be pleasantly surprised. Rule 6. Really important advice. Every time I travel, I usually pick up one of these. I am a huge fan of The Lonely Planet. I like to have a guidebook. I like to read it. I like to talk with everyone I know who's been there. I've been fortunate that often I'll have students who've been from the places I go to, and I try to become as wise as possible. But when you travel, you see some people who will never let their guidebook go. And as you're wandering, just a few days during your trip, leave the guidebook at home and just go out and wander. When I was in Kathmandu, I went for a walk and got completely lost. Couldn't find my way back. The streets there are a maze, and they go in all different directions. I couldn't read the signs. And for 3 hours, I just walked around and explored. After a while, I got comfortable with the fact that I was lost. I just started to enjoy the markets and the people and the different food shops. And I went into places where there were no other tourists. And I just had the time of my life. And I learned so much that day. It was the most memorable part of the trip. And eventually, I gave up and I ordered a rickshaw and went home. But that experience, always carry the hotel or hostel name card in your pocket, because that's your easy out pass. But I would say don't become dependent. Go to the places that aren't in the guidebook. Talk with the locals. Talk with people who know the area. That's where the true treasure is. Those of you who've been to Lynn, you know that's not in the guidebook, but it is there, and it's worth checking out. Just remember, when you travel, there are always going to be highlights you're looking forward to, but this is the quote I live by, and that is that life is not a destination. The journey is everything. We sometimes all get focused on where we're going, the highlights. But don't forget about the fact that there are a lot of things along the way that are worth looking at. Don't have blinders on. Keep your eyes open. Take a detour in your trip. Several times in my life I've traveled where I've been away for 2 weeks to 6 weeks, and I've left with a round-trip air ticket, knowing where I had to be to come home, and maybe 2 nights reservation in a hostel and nothing else planned. And I just plan it out as I go. Just see where the road takes me. And it's really a cool experience. You go to places that you have never imagined. You wander into places like Nagorno-Karabakh, which some of you in my 8th grade probably remember. Places that you might not plan if you just open a Lonely Planet and try to plan every nanosecond before you leave. Be open-minded, experience as much as you can. Now, we travel, and we travel, and we travel. And probably I'm most guilty of breaking this rule. And that is that as we travel the world, don't forget what's in your backyard. I'm leaving France in a few weeks, and I realize that there's some things I haven't ticked off. I haven't been to Mont Saint-Michel. I have a train ticket to go there, so I'm going to get there. I haven't even been to the chateau right down the road in Rouen-Malmaison, so I'm going to make sure to go there this weekend. And sometimes you travel and you've been to a bunch of places, but then you meet someone who's visiting your country and they've been to more places than you have. You just think, oh, well, I'll get there one day. It's in my backyard. Don't put it off. Use that as a training ground for your exploration of the rest of the world. Don't ignore your own backyard. Take advantage of it, especially for those of you here for 3 years. Don't wait until your last month here to experience the country you're living in. Enjoy it, experience it, and use it as a place where you can develop your skills with a backpack. And the best news is when you're traveling locally, you can sleep in your own bed at night most of the time. All right, this is kind of cheesy. Be the sponge. What does that mean? A friend of mine named Colby Campbell, who I used to work with before coming to ASP, used to use this term, be the sponge. And whenever we traveled with students, she used to say to students that as you travel, think of yourself as a sponge. Go out there and absorb as much information as you can. Go out there and learn, journal, take as many notes, have as many experiences, and then when you come back, don't just selfishly keep them all to yourself. You know, there's a difference between bragging about travel and educating people about travel. One thing I encourage you to do, talk with people. Inspire others. Like if you hear that your friends are traveling to that place, or if you know someone who's from the area that you've traveled to, get to know them. Talk about the experience, compare. It's one of the enjoyable things when I go to a place that maybe some of you are from, and then comparing notes. It helps reflect, it helps bring joy to the places you've been, and maybe inspire others to go there. Keep a journal. And this is hard. It requires a little bit of dedication, but I know talking with my grandfather, he lived into his 90s, and while he was at a stage of his life where he could no longer travel, he still enjoyed looking through his old books, seeing the notes that he wrote when he was a teenager. You don't have to do it every day, but do it occasionally. You might enjoy it one day. Who knows, maybe you'll be like this guy and write a whole novel about it and become famous and give homework to future high school students. But again, there's something you can do with your experiences. Don't just leave it to your memory, put it down somewhere. If you have an opportunity, and one of the joys of my job is being able to share with young people, being able to come here, bring it into my lessons, and most of you know I'm a very distractible teacher because I can talk about different places I've been to, but I think it brings life to your conversation. And I think one of the best things you can do is go to a group of students. Here you see Alex, and there you see Marshall. They're not talking about travel, but I like the photos. And share your experiences. It's great. The other thing you can do is write postcards. Now you can send them home to your family. But one thing I'd like to encourage all of you to do is to maybe find a young person, find a 5-year-old who you can inspire. Give them a globe. Don't give them a globe. But it's a dying art. It also helps the local economy. So go out there, write letters to people, and if you have a chance, you can send one off to North Carolina, where I'll be next year. I will leave my address somewhere so you can all get it. But share your experiences. Spread the wealth of knowledge. Release that sponge to as many people as you can. Encourage others to share in your joy. So the world of travel is incredible. It's full of challenge. It will open your world to others, but it will also teach you a lot about yourself. What's also great is it's all about freedom. It gives you the opportunity to go out there. You can choose your route. You can choose your passion. If it's biking, if it is just playing an instrument, maybe you're interested in military history. Maybe you just want to experience winter in the middle of the summer. Maybe you're 30 and you just want to find your inner teenager. Yeah, travel is your opportunity. So personalize it. Make it what you want. But again, be sure to be open-minded. Be sure to share your experiences. And I hope the road of life to all of you brings you to wonderful places. I hope that you'll share some of those experiences with me in the future. Put it down on Facebook, send some postcards. But the most important thing is to enjoy the journey. So I'd like to wish you all bon voyage. Thank you very much for